from the All Indiana Podcast Network.
It's time for real conversation about the real issues that affect our communities.
Poverty, education, equality, and more.
This is Real Talk.
Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Welcome to Real Talk on the All Indiana Podcast Network. I am Reverend Charles Harrison, and on this episode, we're going to talk about Jefferson Shreve, the Republican candidate who laid out his crime prevention plan last week. And we want to talk about, because there's a lot of controversy around it, did his public safety plan help win the election for him, or did it lose it for him? We'll be right back. Welcome to Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison, and thank you so much for joining me today on this podcast, Real Talk. And today we want to talk about the Republican candidate for mayor of Indianapolis, Jefferson Shreve. He put out a crime prevention plan last week. It was, for some, very controversial. For others, they saw it as a brilliant move in order to take away a talking point from the current mayor, Joe Hogsett. And today I have with me a special guest, John Hall, who is the former deputy mayor under Mayor Stephen Goldsmith, a Republican mayor. John Hall is a good friend of mine and also a member of my congregation, Barnes United Methodist Church. And I always talk to him about these issues and respect his opinion. I was hoping to have another good friend of mine on today, but he is busy today and wasn't able to make it. So I have to be the person who has this conversation with John, and I think I had very mixed emotions about it when I heard the crime prevention plan. John, welcome to Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you. Good to be here. Well,
thank you so much for joining me today. And when I heard the crime prevention plan, there were parts of it that I thought was good. I am a proponent of the public safety director. I think the public safety director can play a key role in helping to formulate a crime prevention plan that is more citywide and one that certainly, builds collaboration across the city to address, this crisis of urban violence that Indianapolis is experiencing. And I thought that was a mistake of Mayor Hogsett, to take that position away. And I know he felt like he could do it himself, but I just felt like that the mayor should not be bogged down in that and having to spend a great deal of time dealing with public safety, that you ought to have someone who comes with that kind of background and can really work with community and particularly neighborhoods and grassroots organizations and faith-based groups in partnership with law enforcement and the courts and the prosecutor in trying to come up with a public safety plan that addresses the crisis that we're facing. So I like that part of Shreve's proposal, and I thought he had some other interesting, unique things. But what seemed to suck the air out of the room that day was the proposals by Shreves that were, John, very similar to what Mayor Hogsett proposed several weeks ago. And those are concerning, certainly, what some would say gun control. And these are the proposals that Hogsett basically recommended himself. One was to raise the minimum age of purchasing a firearm in Indianapolis from 18 to 21. The second was banning assault weapons in Indianapolis. And the third was dealing with the permitless carry, having a permit to carry a concealed firearm in Indianapolis. And then Shreves went a little further even than Hogsett, wanting to pass a citywide ordinance prohibiting the discharge of a firearm with maximum allowable penalties for those who do so. So those were the four things that Jefferson Shreve proposed, and some in the Republican Party just went crazy over that. They went crazy. Particular, you heard it on several of the Republican radio stations. Hammer and Nigel. I happened to listen to that. The gun guy. They just went crazy over that. As a Republican, John, how do you feel about it? And did Shreves go too far? Did he lose a portion of his base that would be critical for him if he is going to upset Joe Hogsett in basically a city that is blue now? I think the numbers are around 60-40, 61-39, something like that.
Well, that's a very powerful question, and I want a disclaimer early on that Joe Hogsett and I have been friends for about 30 years.
Okay,
he's a runner, and I think he's played very hard here in Indianapolis to try to look at this whole particular crime issue. I think you laid out a couple of good points early. One, Marion County now is blue.
Right.
The second piece is that being blue, that gives the Democrat candidate for any race maybe a 20-point lead.
Okay.
Starting out of the gate.
Right.
So if any Republican opponent that's going to make a serious run at any office in Marion County, they will have to figure out a way in order to capture independents, some Democrats, some moderate Republicans. There's no other way that you're going to be able to do it. So, my question is, could a Republican candidate for mayor win Marion County by positioning himself to be a red candidate?
Okay.
I don't think he can.
Good question. Okay, go ahead.
I don't think he can. So I think that Shreve's position to have a gun restriction type of program may be something that would keep him in a competitive race fairly close. And I think I would say that's why I did it. Now, I'm a gun owner.
Okay.
And my neighbors are gun owners. You come over New Year's Eve and you'll be aware that my neighbors are gun owners. And so I'm looking at someone that is going to respect the Second Amendment,
right,
but also have good sense enough to know that, we don't want to go back to the wild, wild west.
Right.
And so I would say that the Republican candidate Shreve made a strategic move to sort of take away the crime issue somewhat from Mayor Hogsett. And I would look at it, I wouldn't look at it as a dumb move. I'd look at it as a pretty strategic move.
Some would argue, and some of the criticism that you've been hearing is that in Shreve's announcement of his gun policy in Indianapolis, that he took the focus off of Mayor Hogsett and his struggles in almost 8 years of being mayor, with the rise of certainly the gun violence in Indianapolis that has led to, record-breaking numbers of shootings and murders and homicides. So that's part of the criticism that you have heard from those on the right who were supportive of Shreve's, and I think it seems that some of them now are wavering and tend to be somewhat angry at Shreve's. What do you say about that?
I would say it's too early to tell. One, the state legislature will have the final say over the 18-year-old to 21 eligibility to apply for a gun permit or to have gun-free zones. So Mayor Hogsett and the candidate Shreve still will have to be able to work with that state legislature in order to provide any kind of relief in the type of program they want. I've not heard the state legislature say that they are willing to work with either candidate for mayor. Right. And so those Republicans who are concerned, I think they need to step back and look and see, is this going to be doable? Is this going to be possible? Are there other strategies that Hogsett and Shreve are presenting that will be a better fit to reduce crime here in Marion County?
Well, one of the criticisms of one of the former, candidates for mayor on the Republican side, Abdul, I think his criticism are twofold. One, he feels like both Shreves and Hogsett missed the mark when it comes to their proposal to address the issue of, the rising gun violence in Indianapolis. That one, their gun proposal seems to focus on law-abiding citizens and misses the mark of those who are the ones really the perpetrators of the violence. That is not law-abiding citizens who possess, guns, but it's, juveniles under age, 17 and under, and then it's adults who are, are felons who are not supposed to have a gun in the first place. That's where the focus needs to be at. And then number two, that he doesn't believe that the state legislator is this has no chance at all of passing in the state legislature for them to address any of those issues that both Hogsett and Shreves are proposing concerning gun control.
Abdul is an extremely intelligent guy. So his views, you got to look at, you got to listen to. But I think that there are pieces of both Mayor Hogsett and Shreve that can bring about an impact on the reduction of violence in Marion County. I think, Shreve talks about targeting 200 to 400 shooters and letting the police do the work. Don't let them do pieces that they're doing. I want to applaud the police. I mean, they are doing their jobs. However, it may take more input, more resources to do stuff. I like the ability to have those federal judges looking at crime in Marion County and targeting that. I'm not sure how soon that can kick in, but I like the fact of that. So I think they both have strategies that can reduce violence. But until we have action from our neighborhoods and communities to get those kind of resources that can aid neighborhoods to respond to the violence in their neighborhoods, we need to focus on that. And I'm hoping that as this campaign goes along, that both candidates will get a chance to address that. How much resources are you going to pour in these neighborhoods to help us combat the high rise in violence?
I think Mayor Hogsett, one of his proposals, I think is on target in the hiring of 3 additional prosecutors.
Yeah.
Because I think from the law enforcement perspective, what they see as the problem is the broken judicial system, both at the juvenile level and also at the adult level when it comes to repeat violent offenders that tend to be arrested and are out on no bond or low bond, or they are put on house arrest. But they're right back out in the streets, and they tend to be, when you talk to law enforcement, the perpetrators are victims of the next violent crime. So for law enforcement, they see a major problem, which I'm not for sure. I think Hogsett did address it in maybe taking some of this to the federal level rather than the state level, which some believe that's really what the problem is, that you have to address this broken judicial system that is not holding repeat violent offenders accountable. And with juveniles, 17 and under, who are arrested for either the possession of an unlawful weapon or committed some kind of gun crime repeatedly, and they feel like there's no accountability there. I think that's where some people in the community felt like should have been a greater focus there.
No doubt that is, especially for those of us who live in the urban core, our main concern, and I'm speaking for John Hall,
right,
who
okay.
lives in the Riverside area. I would say that is the main concern, is that individuals who commit violent crimes and are able to return to their neighborhoods, they're not returning to Carmel.
Right.
They're not returning to Noblesville.
Right.
They're returning back next door to me.
Right.
And so that's where I think the focus has got to be, where I think Shreve makes a point, is investing more money in the mental health piece. And I think that's that's one way I believe that can be helpful. But I do think that the 3, are they federal judges or 3 prosecutors?
3 prosecutors that will work with the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Yeah, I like that piece. I think that's a winning piece.
This is Reverend Charles Harrison with Real Talk, and today we're talking about Republican candidate Jefferson Shreve's public safety proposal with John Hall, who is a former deputy mayor of Indianapolis under Mayor Goldsmith. John, there was a lot of people that were, I think, waiting to hear Shreve's public safety plan. I think there are a lot of moderate Democrats, and I think black Democrats that are, fed up with the whole violence piece, and they were looking, to hear what Shreves had to say, concerning public safety. I do think there's a lot of good stuff in his plan. I would say, though, someone looking in from the outside, it seems so far to be overshadowed the rest of his plan by the proposal that he has made concerning addressing the issue of guns in the city of Indianapolis, that basically is the same proposal that Hogsett submitted. So the argument is that it has been overshadowed because it's the same thing Hogsett is proposing, and is overshadowed the good pieces of what some feel like is Shreve's public safety plan.
I think that Shreve has time as the mayor between now and November to lift up those pieces within those plans that can address the reduction of violence in Marion County. As I said earlier, I don't think that a Republican candidate who is far right can win in Marion County. So, taking the criminal issue off the table is what I think it did with Shreve's presenting his plan. Although there's differences in the plans, I think there is enough time between now and November with the debates, if they have more than one debate, with advertising, with community meetings. I think that the candidates can have a chance to lift up those pieces that can make neighborhood groups and the average citizen feel comfortable in supporting that candidate for mayor of Indianapolis.
So a lot of people would argue that one of the successes or reason Mayor Ballard was successful was that he was not really viewed as a Republican, just his whole approach, and how he related to the community. Many people saw him more as an independent than they did really a Republican, because he did not espouse what some would say were Republican talking points or Republican policies that made him attractive to many independents and moderate Democrats in Marion County, which was the reason why he won 2 elections against a popular, Mayor Peterson, and then, the second time he beat Melina Kennedy, who was also popular within the Democratic Party. So do you see Shreve's move is positioning himself in a way that he's not being tagged, and I think that's what I'm hearing from you, as this, traditional Republican that makes him a little more appealing to independents and moderate Democrats. And would you and that would be your message to those Republicans who are freaking out about his gun plan?
Well, I would say that you're on target. Now, to my colleagues on the Republican side, I would look at the changing the age limit as of great concern. I would look at
from 18 to 21?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would.
Yeah.
I would. You're grown in every other aspect when you get to be 18.
Yeah, you sent the military. Those in military are given guns to go fight for this nation at 18.
Exactly. And, you can vote at 18.
Right.
So, yeah, that would be it. But I would think that, Shreve's a bright guy. I would think that he's understanding that in order to be competitive,
okay,
because, Mayor Hogsett is a two-time winner. He's won elections statewide before me. He's no rookie at this game.
Right.
So you can't come in, half-stepping and being far right in a blue county. So I think it was a strategic move and a decent one in order to try to keep him competitive. I'm not saying that, he's winning today.
Right.
But I'm saying that I believe I'm waiting on the first polls to come out.
Right.
Just to see how far ahead Mayor Hogsett is, if he is. And on that distance. But I would say that Shreve would benefit by being more moderate in Marion County.
Yeah, because probably this polls well in the Democratic Party. This whole gun control proposal that Mayor Hogsett introduced, raising the legal age to purchase a gun from 18 to 21. Certainly the ban on assault weapons is popular within Democratic circles, and I think to a certain extent independent voters too. This whole issue of being able to carry a concealed weapon without a permit. I think a lot of Democrats frown on that, and they believe that certainly has led to the violence. I would say 2 things. There is no evidence at this point that any of those things, being able to carry a permit without a license, has led to any more violence in Indianapolis. I think the numbers don't depict that at this point or show that has happened. And I hear some arguing that, but from the time the bill was passed to this July, the numbers don't show that.
Right. I would say that those intent on doing criminal behavior do not care about any laws.
Correct.
They will carry guns and weapons and whatever they need to apply their tools. It is the good guy that probably has to go through a lot of red tape to protect himself. So from my point of view, I don't see that as being a contributor to the higher crime violence. But I do agree that you've got to allow police to do their job. You've got to address that mental health piece. And then you've got to make sure that neighborhoods feel comfortable in talking and working with the police.
Are you surprised that the violence piece and gun issue seems to be maybe the number one issue in this mayor's race? Are you surprised by that?
I'm not surprised because every day on TV there is a story about a shooting or killing. And that drip, drip, drip has, I think, lifted up the violence. And now, back in my days with Goldsmith, we had the highest homicide, 98.
98, yes.
98. That was a high homicide year, 143, I believe.
Yeah, 143 murders.
143,
I think it was 162
like
homicides, yes.
And now 143 would be a good number for this year.
Right, absolutely.
That's how I feel that probably the criminal aspect has lifted up. It's grown. And, society has shifted. There's a lot of things going on that's pushing people to do stuff. But we can argue poverty. We can argue parents that aren't dealing with their children. And I believe there are variables all up in there that suggest that. But at the same time, there's always been poverty.
Right. Absolutely.
There's always been parents that aren't raising their kids right. So why now is this huge surge? I think that's for people like Abdul and you, those smart ones, to come up with answers. But I really believe that this year there will be a competitive race.
So the Republicans see Hogsett as vulnerable over this issue of the violence in Indianapolis, and is that why Shreve? And I'm hearing it correctly from you. I think he took one of the attacks against him off the table when it comes to Shreve's being a member of the NRA, because I think the NRA are mad at him too about his proposal, that he kind of took that off the table to allow a real debate about Hogsett's strategy to deal with the issue of urban violence compared to Shreve's is plan.
I think it will take the issue off in a debate.
Okay.
Somewhat.
Okay.
Now, Mayor Hogsett is shrewd, so he can play this.
He can play, all right.
Yeah, he can play this. And the fact that, you've been endorsed by the NRA. But see, I believe you can be a gun-loving Second Amendment person, but yet want safeguards to keep people from going berserk and terrorizing neighborhoods. That's, I think that's why things have lifted up. The homicide rate is almost double.
Right, what it used to be.
Than 20 years ago?
Right.
And so there has to be some sort of strategy that will address guns and the usage of guns in order to, I think people in Marion County want something that will address guns, whether it's banning assault weapons or raising the age to purpose, raise the age that you can buy a gun. I'm not sure that that's a winner.
I think for some people, like myself, I'm not for sure we really are dealing with what the real problem is. And the real problem is what's happening in the underground economy, what's happening on the black market with the sale of guns, easy access, particularly to black youth and young adults who are getting them unlawfully. And I'm not for sure that there's been anything proposed as of yet that really addresses that issue, that if all of those laws were passed today, would it really impact the easy access to guns in the urban core that is creating this gun violence crisis? And I think those are the questions that some are asking, even with those two candidates making similar proposals. Even if we passed it, would we see any real impact on the ground because of how repeat violent offenders are getting guns and underage juveniles?
I think the piece that is attractive to me is that if you allow the police to do their job, and if you can hire 300-400 more police, or how many ever you need to man your numbers, I think that's attractive to me, and it may be attractive to a lot of people who are not Republicans, but just citizens who are wanting this issue to be addressed.
Okay.
And so I think when you say to me, I'm going to let the police do their job, that's what I want to hear. That, there's not any political stuff involved here, don't go on the east side, don't track down Smith, he didn't, we're not doing that this week. No. Let the police do their job. Maybe get these illegal guns off the street. I think the police have made some strong efforts.
Oh, they have. I think the problem is I think IMPD is doing a great job, along with the other federal partners, is that as quick as they're getting them off the street, they're being replaced. And I would certainly like to hear a conversation about how do we address the flow of unlawful guns in the urban core that get in the hands of black teens and young adults who are not lawfully supposed to have those guns. I think that's where some of us who have been on the ground a long time would like to hear a conversation. I know a lot of law-abiding gun owners who use their guns responsibly. Most of them have never used them before. They just have them. But I don't think we're really drilling down on that piece, which I think is really driving the violence. In Indianapolis. Yeah.
Good point. Good point. Yeah, I think the reason that violence is a critical issue is the everyday occurrence that something's happening out here in our neighborhoods. I think, though, that this will not be the only issue.
Right.
But I think it is definitely high profile with the continuation of this just drip. Somebody's getting killed, somebody's getting shot. And the underground economy plays a role.
Right.
And I think there's, just interactions with individuals has changed from, 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Right, that's true.
You shoot now rather than fight.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's a whole different day. And I'm hoping that both of these candidates, Hawkshead and Shreve, can address how they feel they can make neighborhoods feel safe.
John, thank you so much for this conversation today. As we talked about, this whole issue of Shreve's is proposal to deal with the issue of the crime and violence in Indianapolis. And we talked about both him and Mayor Hogsett, their proposals to deal with this whole issue of gun violence in Indianapolis, and the response that we have heard from some in the conservative circles about that. And I was telling you last night, I heard a prominent judge, in Indiana, really affirm what she heard from Shreves dealing with the gun violence, because she felt like that was one of the issues that is driving it. So you're hearing both support and criticism of it, but I guess that's the life of a politician.
You got to play to win.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Thank you so much, John,
Thank you,
for joining me today. I'm Reverend Charles Harrison, and this has been Real Talk. Join me next time as I bring more real talk about the real issues that affect our communities here in Indianapolis and across the country. Be sure to follow and subscribe to this podcast and share it on Facebook and Twitter with others, and spread the word to others about Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison. I try to be real with you and address the real issues that are affecting Indianapolis, the state of Indiana, and our nation. I pray that you have a blessed and a wonderful day.
This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast.
And be sure to check out other great podcasts on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Online now at allindianapodcast.com.